Thank you, Judy. A pleasure to be here with you today. Our sacred text for today is from Psalm 133. How very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. It is like precious oil running down the head. It's like the dew of Mount Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. For there the sacred mystery has ordained a blessing, life. Sometimes my dreams awaken me to truths that I need to face. I once had a disturbing dream where I was in an underground parking lot and the police were arresting a man for a crime. He had been stealing other people's faces. All around the garage were angry people whose original appearance had been stolen, and they now had to wear someone else's face. As I reflected on the dream, I began to wonder, is the face I'm wearing truly mine? What is my original face? Or as the Buddhist Quinn asks, what is your original face? The face you had before your parents were born. Well, I'm not going to go back that far today. I'll just start with my own life. And I was thinking about, as I reflected on the dream, that at some point in my life I had made a false choice. I decided that to belong, I had to give up my original face, that I could be authentic or I could belong, but not both. The psalm I read a few minutes ago celebrates kindred living together in unity. But I wonder, how many of us have given up our original faces for the sake of living together in unity? How many of us have sacrificed a core piece of our soul in order to keep the peace, be loved, or even just to survive? My original church home was the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. It's where I was raised, it's where I went to seminary, where I was a pastor for 5 years. Now, twice in American history, Methodists look like they're going to become the third time, but twice in American history, a Christian denomination has had a conservative, progressive struggle and gone even more conservative. So once was the Southern Baptist Convention, and the other was the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And of course, most of my family was Southern Baptist. I was in the Missouri Synod. The universe has a great sense of humor surrounding me with ultra-conservatism. So I really struggled as a seminary student. The rigid doctrines that I was taught in seminary conflicted with the expansive love of the sacred that I knew in my own heart. I was told at seminary to ignore such feelings because they were misleading and infected with sin. True doctrine alone could be trusted as established once and for all in the Formula of Concord written by Lutheran theologians in the year 1530. Ironically, concord means unity. So one of our more progressive professors at the seminary, Dr. Preuss, seemed to be open to all of our questions, even the heretical ones. We soon realized, however, what progressive meant. We could ask any question as long as the answer was to be found somewhere in the Formula of Concord. I was also told that certain people were not kindred. Those who ordained women, those who were pro-choice, those who didn't believe in Jesus as their personal savior, well, the list was rather long. And one of those non-kindred included people like me, gay. So I buried my heart, put on an Orthodox face, and feigned unity. So years later, before I left that church, I led an educational program for Missouri Synod clergy in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Each year, we had a mix of internal and external speakers, and for the external speakers, I'd invite someone who could create some discomfort, hoping for a little evolution amongst our clergy, all of whom, of course, were men, because the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod does not ordain women. So one time, I invited the pastor of the Cathedral of Hope, which is the largest congregation in the world whose primary ministry is to the LGBTQ+ community. The pastor showed how their liturgy and theology mirrored that of the rest of mainline Christianity. And then he said, I quote, "Really, the only difference between you and me is that I achieve sexual friction in a different way than you do." I watched old men's faces turn pale as this began to register within them. At the end, several of them stood up and railed against him for pronouncing benediction upon people living in unrepentant sin. Others, however, with tears in their eyes, thanked him for providing a spiritual home for those who found no welcome in their congregations. They blessed him and his ministry. And for me, a closeted gay minister, it was a healing moment. It was the first time I had heard another Missouri Synod minister bless the fullness of who I am. Now, after these meetings, one of my tasks was to send a thank you letter to our speakers. We had a standard letter that addressed the speaker as sister or brother and thanking them for their presentation. Now, mind you, we had many speakers all across the political and theological spectrum with all kinds of different perspectives. But this time, and only this time, I was told not to address our speaker as brother and not to close the letter with a blessing for him and his congregation, the one and only time. Now, I could still hear in my heart the song I was taught in Lutheran school. Every flower soft and gay, gently smiling seems to say, God's a parent kind and true, one who loves and cares for you. That's the sacred that I knew in my own heart. And so, I wrote to our speaker, addressing him as brother, thanking him for his presentation, and blessing him and his congregation. I was beginning to recover some of my original face. How about you? What's your original face? Have you ever exchanged it even for a while for a face not your own? Perhaps for the sake of unity. Our text for today extols living together in unity. But unity is not unanimity, nor is it conformity, nor is it ignoring injustice just so we can all get along, nor is it celebrating our individual freedom while the institutions we inhabit oppress, abuse, and dehumanize. Unity is a love that keeps expanding who counts as kindred. Unity is a love big enough to hold the pain of the oppressed, and here's the catch, without hating the oppressor. Unity is a love that will not rest until both oppressor and oppressed are fully liberated. So how in the world do we do that? How do we love that much and move our world in that direction? Our Buddhist friends provide an image that I find helpful. In our backyard is a statue of Quinn, the feminine embodiment of compassion, of loving kindness. Now, Kuan Yin's hands form a mudra, which is a spiritually symbolic hand gesture. So her right hand, palm facing outward, creating a boundary, a resistance. Her left hand resting at her side with a welcome, an invitation to receive with compassion. And to hold this paradox, her feet firmly planted in the ground, rooted in and drawing on the source of life. She embodies our mudra in a time rife with authoritarianism, racism, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. Well, the list is rather long. On the one hand, we say a firm no to injustice, to lies, to oppression. And on the other hand, we bring a beginner's mind, thirsty to know the story and the person behind the position. We engage with humility, confessing that we too have contributed to the problems of our world and that we ourselves are a work in progress. We have been unwitting accomplices of oppression and are now starting to wake up. We have collectively ignored the cries of Mother Earth herself and are now paying attention. Knowing this, we hold compassion for the oppressed, for the struggling, for ourselves, and as hard as it is, even for the oppressors, who themselves are not free. Mesmerized by fear and grievance, they have been brainwashed and heart-hardened to project harm outward while believing they are doing so in the name of love. But love does not oppress. Love does not ignore injustice. Love does not feign unity to keep the peace. And Kuan Yin embodies for us the mudra for engaged love, truth and justice, compassion and humility, rooted in our source, rooted in a strong compassion, ever growing and expanding our own being out into the world. Now, in our sacred text, unity is compared to the dew of Mount Hermon. In that part of the world, Mount Hermon is the tallest peak, and it catches the moisture coming in from the Mediterranean. It gets saturated. And that overabundant saturation of Mount Hermon is seen descending on the much drier, arid Mount Zion, bestowing life-giving water upon it. How can we be Mount Hermon for our arid nation? How can we be so saturated with liberation that everyone around us is also liberated? How? We show up with our original faces in the mess, right in the mess of the world. We hold close the web of life, kind and true. That is the unity that underlies everything. We call on our human kindred to expand who counts as kindred, and until we all get there, we become that expansion in our very being, in the way that we interact, in the way that we talk, in the way that we engage. We create together a shared world where our celebrated diversity makes us more united than a feigned unity ever could. Well, this seems like a tall order, and it is. But we're not alone. This psalm was a communal hymn sung as pilgrims ascended up Mount Zion together. On the long ascent up the mountain, those pilgrims had to share oil, water, disagreements, laughter, tears, stories, and songs. It was messy and hard, hot and dusty, but they eventually got to Zion together as kindred. One step of love after another. We're on a pilgrimage. We are on a communal movement composed of countless original faces, doing innumerable small acts of love and justice, all of which, over time, transforms the world, even when everything seems lost. And this can happen anywhere, even today. Palestinian-American poet Naomi Shihab Nye wrote about just such an experience in her own life. This is what she said. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been detained 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate 4A understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. But Gate 4A was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing loudly. "Help," said the flight service person. "Talk to her. What's her problem?" We told her her flight was going to be late, and she started doing this. I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke to her haltingly. "Shu dao Shu biduk habibti stani shwe min fadlik shu bit si wi." The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely, and she had to be in El Paso the next day for a very important medical procedure. I said, you're fine, you'll get there. Who's picking you up? Let's call him." So we called her son, and I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and would ride next to her, Southwest Airlines. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for fun. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 friends in common. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took about 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, out of her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdery sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out the free beverages from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving us all apple juice, and they too were covered with powdered sugar. And I looked over to my new best friend. We were holding hands by now. And she had a potted plant poking out of her bag. Some medicinal thing with green, furry leaves. Such an old country traveling tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around at the gate of late and weary ones and thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in this gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They all took the cookies. I wanted to hug all these other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. To live together with kindred in unity, it's going to take expanding who counts as kindred. It's going to take holding the paradox of justice and compassion firmly rooted and sourced the web of life, a love that cannot be overcome. It's going to take courage to restore our original faces and let them so shine that others remember who they really are. Kindred, who deep down also yearn for a shared world. And yes, it's probably going to take some cookies too. But it's still possible here and now. Not everything is lost. Amen.